Hello. This video is going to be about some fundamental music terms that you'll need to know that will really enrich your experience in the class. The first term is melody, sometimes also referred to as a tune, the melody of a song or the tune of a song. Now most of you probably already understand what a melody is, but it's actually a surprisingly difficult term to define. However, one way you can think about it is a succession of notes that when put together creates a recognizable musical phrase, a musical sentence, if you will. So, for example, if I play these notes, you know what song it is, you can recognize it. To give you another example, you recognize that one as well. And I can even change the notes. I can play it with different notes, but the melody can still be the same. The next term is harmony. The best way to think about harmony is whatever supports the melody. So if I stick with this melody that I just played, the harmony would be, it doesn't sound like much on its own, but when played together, it really enriches it and it gives it a more robust sound and it really fills it out. Now, generally, in the music that we'll be listening to, certain instruments are likely to have the melody. Most common would be a vocalist or a singer, or perhaps an electric guitar, maybe a piano, whereas other instruments are more likely to be a harmonic function, or more likely to have a harmonic function. These can also be piano, but it can be rhythm guitar, acoustic guitar, bass guitar, things like that. Even singers, though, could do both. For example, if you have two singers singing at the same time, one singer will probably be singing the melody, that recognizable part of the song, whereas the other would be doing a harmony, something that complements it, but it's different. The next two terms go together. The first one is timbre. It looks like it would be pronounced timbre, but it is pronounced timbre, almost like it should be spelled T-A-M-B-E-R. And the other one is tone. They both describe the sound characteristics of an instrument or a singer, but I want you to think of timbre as being objective, whereas tone is subjective. So for example, the timbre is the musical quality that something has, the sound quality. So I want you to close your eyes. Yes, actually close your eyes and keep them closed until I say to open them. I am going to play a chord. Now, keep them closed. I'm going to play that same chord on a different instrument. Okay, you can open your eyes. Which instrument played the first chord? Which instrument played the second chord? The first instrument was the piano. The second instrument was guitar. That's the timbre. The fact that you can tell the difference. You can tell which instrument is which just from the sound. That's their timbre, their sound characteristic. But now let's talk about tone. Now, tone is usually used to refer to one instrument, but the different sound qualities it can have. For example, if I strum the guitar with my thumb right over the sound hole, it sounds like this. If I strum the guitar with the same chord, but my thumb way up here, a little bit different tone. And if I put my hand way down by the bridge, very different tone, almost sounds like a banjo. So it's all one guitar. In fact, it's all the same guitar playing the same chord, the same notes, but the difference is it has a different tone. And that's because I'm doing something. And that could be the way you play the instrument. That could be the quality of the instrument. One guitar can sound better than a different guitar because it's made of higher quality materials. I can have different amp settings. I can have an acoustic piano versus an electric piano. They're both a piano, so they both generally have the same timbre, but they have a very different tone. Now, timbre cannot really be argued. It is what it is. It's the timbre of a clarinet. It's the timbre of a saxophone. However, tone, like I said, is more subjective. You can say this has a good tone, this has a bad tone, based on your own personal opinion. Now, there are certain types of sounds that we generally think or consider to be a good sound, so there may be some agreement about a good tone versus a bad tone. But generally, that's the difference. One is objective and refers to the general sound of an instrument or a singer. The other is subjective and refers to, on a more specific level, this guitar versus that guitar, or playing one guitar a certain way. And this is true of all instruments. I'm just using piano and guitar as the examples. The next term is time. And time can also be referred to as rhythm. That's just how is the song organized. This can be the speed of it. This can be, does it sound like it's in 4? Does it sound like it's in 3? It can also refer to how fast or slow it is. The next term is pitch. Now, pitch is the note. Which note is it? On a scientific level, it's actually the frequency, the speed that the sound waves are vibrating. On a piano, the sound comes from actual strings inside there vibrating. On a guitar, you pluck the strings. On a drum, you hit the top of the drum. It's called a head. It's usually made out of some kind of plastic or skin, and it vibrates. On a brass instrument, you buzz your lips on the mouthpiece, and that's the vibration. On a wind instrument, you're usually blowing through a reed, and the reed vibrates, so that's where you get the vibration from. But the pitch is just the speed at which it's vibrating. And the most important thing that I need all of you to understand is the difference between a high pitch and a low pitch. Just to give you a few really common examples, men normally sing or speak at a lower pitch than women. The bass guitar is a lower pitch than a guitar. The tuba is the extreme low pitch range, whereas the flute or the piccolo would be the extreme high pitch range. Then you have other instruments like a trumpet or a clarinet or a saxophone, which are generally considered to be in a moderate or mid-range for pitch. But that's what the pitch is. And you could say a succession of pitches or notes creates a melody. So if someone were to say, what are the pitches for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, I'd say it's C, C, G, G, A, G. Those are the pitches. The seventh term is dynamics. Dynamics just means volume. It can have a loud volume, it can have a soft volume. The dynamics or the volume can change. It can crescendo to something louder, or decrescendo or diminuendo into something quieter. In music, we use certain terms to talk about dynamics. We would say that something that's loud is forte, something that's soft is piano, something that is kind of moderate would be mezzo piano, mezzo forte. Really, really loud is fortissimo or fortissimo. You don't actually need to learn those terms for this class. You just need to know what dynamics are. So if I, for example, say, describe the dynamics of this song, you can say that it begins very quiet and then gets louder in the middle. Something like that is fine. Understanding dynamics on that level. And just to give a brief example, the drummer for Blink-182, Travis Barker, is known for his complete lack of dynamics. He never really plays soft. Everything is really loud. But he still gets an interesting musical contrast because he uses different drums. He plays some drums that he's still hitting with the same force, but a tom drum, a mounted drum, sounds different than a crash cymbal or a snare drum. So even though they're being struck with the same force, they have different tone or different timbre depending on which type of drums you're comparing. And you can still get an interesting musical contrast. And that's one of the reasons you use dynamics. That's one of the reasons you change all of these things, just for interesting musical contrast. But you don't necessarily have to change dynamics, although it's a very useful way to do it. The second to last, the eighth term, is texture. So texture refers to how many layers are going on in a particular song. So for example, your average rock song probably has 2 guitars, drums, bass, and vocalist. That would be the texture. A thinner texture, as we would say, would be something like Peter, Paul, and Mary, or a folk song, where it's just maybe the human voice singing and an acoustic guitar. A very dense texture might be a full orchestra with violins, violas, cellos, basses, trumpets, trombones, oboes, bassoons, percussion. That would be in a very thick texture versus a very thin texture. So it's just the layers of instruments in the music. The final 9th term is form. Form is just the structure. There are a few different very common musical structures that you may have heard about in other classes, or if you're musicians, you may have played them. ABA, binary form, ternary form, sonata allegro form. However, in the music that we'll be listening to, we will use a little bit of what's called AABA, but we'll also use another one called verse-chorus form. So for example, a song that has an AABA form means that there's one section of music, maybe it's a melody, maybe it's a phrase, and we're going to call that A. You play that, and because the form is called AABA, you play it again. But then you get to B, so you have a different section of the song, you go to that one, and then you come back to the first one again, so you get another A. So for example, if I were to say that this is my A section, and this is my B section, I would go A, B, A. Whereas verse-chorus, and this is, again, the most prominent one in American popular music, but verse-chorus is when you have a verse which has one melody and some words to it, and you have a chorus which has probably a different melody with different words. You do the verse, you do the chorus, you go back to the verse, but this time you have different lyrics than you sang the first time, but the same melody. Then you go to the chorus, but the chorus is probably the same. So the verse changes, and they usually have a chorus in between that does not change. And then finally you get something like a 12-bar blues, which is as the name suggests, it comes from the blues, and 12 bars. A bar is not a name for a measure. It's just, I mentioned number 5 was time or rhythm. Sometimes time is divided into what we call measures. Again, it's not essential that you memorize all of these different types of forms, but just you know that that's what form is referring to. All right, well, thank you for watching this video. If you have any other questions, always let me know.